It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. Can you copy the rhythm? Can you copy the movement? Can you copy the style and still remain a part of the pal? People will move it, racing gears. So open ears and remove fears. And don't mention that we did it until we did it for years. It takes heart and suggestion. Add a new point and don't have to hide from confession. Exit grief and bad belief. And let's take it to the deep end of our life and quit the brief. Living standards to a standard of 100 years of good living at a time. For 1,000 years, we're fighting for the 1,000. We don't move inches, we move years. Eternally, and the angel is here to prioritize and meeting with disciples who fast and eat and have no headaches since they are not smoking a competition. The enemy is trying to pollute and kiss, and that's one end way of his mission. He has plenty of tactics, but I get rid of each one before it communicates with justice and is justice. But there's no forgiveness of the enemy. It's on the angel battalions, on feet and not on stallions. But some angels fly and some angels are on wheels rolling. While each future of each person has a place and name on it. So be here for the fight, be here for the war. It's a word of mouth war, the victorious faces profess the glory of the Lord. It's a word of mouth war, the victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war, the victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war, the victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. Turn the eternal effect on and either keep it to yourself or spread the news that you refuse to lose and you don't choose your options right now. You already chose the angel's message, but you don't help my toes. I stay on them and I rose a long time ago. This is just a memory, just a saying, and actually in the war that my enemies are facing. And until death, they want more. So here I am, believing, receiving, and doing my soul work for the outcome. By the way, for the enemy is done, plus none. Thinking that I'm going to let her be my girl. I already can get a girl, my same kind, my same world. Not the devil who wants to be in a kissing in my life. Not devil, no strife, it's only conflict. I'm not a convict, and I was born to serve myself as Christ and go to heaven. I'm not a ghetto reverend, I was gassed with the Jews in the Holocaust, or am I just expressing a dream? This ain't the only life we can live or have been through. I know it's more than what it seems. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious face will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. The victorious faces will put the enemy to the sword. It's a word of mouth war. It's a word of mouth war. It's a word of mouth war. It's a word of mouth war.